The world is changing. New ideas and technology change how we connect and interact with each other. The role of entrepreneurs, brands, and creatives is ever evolving. What's going to impact the way we work and think? Which trends will make a difference? Will the way we communicate and market ourselves remain the same? Are there universal rules that still apply, and how does the future look like? Today, we'll find some answers. Sweet people, how's it going? Welcome to the Sweetspot Podcast. I'm your host, Marc Suess, and if you're looking for the sweet spot of your brand, you've come to the right place. In today's episode, I talked to Ryan Alford. He's entrepreneur, marketing expert, and host of one of the top marketing podcasts in the US, the Radcast. With over 20 years of experience in marketing, Ryan founded his own full-service digital agency, The Radical. In this episode, I talked to him about his own creative routines, what's radical about his approach, the biggest changes that happened in the biz over 2 decades. Even more important, Ryan shares his 7 ageless truths about successful marketing. We dive into personal branding, explore the cultural differences between the US and Germany when it comes to creative work and storytelling, and we'll look into the future of marketing. Before we start, a quick shout out to my friends of the Cinema and Movie Podcast with Nothing to Say.
I'm Austin Lugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say. And let's talk about movies. With over 3,000 films log, Andrew and I, best friends since middle school, have dedicated our lives to watching, making, and talking about movies. Each week, Andrew and I handpick a movie he's seen, I've seen, or neither of us have seen, and dive deep into anything and everything two wannabe cinephiles could ever think of. From horror to dramedy, we do it all. So join us as we talk about everything movies, and maybe you too can become a bona fide cinephile.
Yeah, so if you're interested in storytelling and the creative craft, check out With Nothing to Say. You'll find a link to the podcast in the show notes. And now, without further ado, please enjoy my talk to Ryan Alford.
Welcome to the Sweet Side. This is the Sweetspot Podcast with Marc Suess, investigating entrepreneurship, purpose, and the creative life.
Sweet people, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Ryan Alford. Hi, Ryan. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Mark, it's great to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
Of course. Well, I am delighted to have you, actually, since we do similar things, I would say. You have an agency. I run my design studio. We both host podcasts about marketing, brand building, creative work. So, in my experience, there are 2 types of creative entrepreneurs. Those who work very structured and disciplined way, and those who rather, let's say, improvise and embrace the creative chaos. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
I feel like I tend to be probably more towards the latter. I own an agency called Radical. And if I fell to the other end, I wouldn't be living up to our name. I often challenge our team to live up to our name. And I think with that comes kind of pushing the envelope. I will say that, there are things, I know we'll get into it, that I am practical about. So there are some truths and some things that I think, are the fundamental building blocks of marketing and messaging and, driving experience that hold true. But I think the mediums, the tactics, and kind of the things outside of the norm, there's a lot of availability to push the limits right now.
Absolutely. So I wondered, when I read through your biography and everything you do, which we'll totally dive into later, but I wondered, do you strictly compartmentalize your time and carve out studio days for your podcast, or do you go with the flow and work whenever inspiration hits you? So can you walk us through a day in the life of Ryan Alford?
Yeah. I feel like I'm pretty intentional. When I started Radical, I've been in the agency business for 22 years, but 17 of those were working for other people, other brands, other companies, other agencies. Spent 5 years in Manhattan on Madison Avenue, working on some of the largest brands in the world. But now owning my own company, being an entrepreneur, I became very intentional with my time. And, we started the podcast literally the first week we started the agency. And It was just a couple of us. It was not, it wasn't like we had 30 people starting an agency. It was me and another hire that I'd made. But I became very intentional about the podcast and about my schedule. Because with podcasting, especially if you aren't diligent, there's a, study that supposedly it's called pod fade, where, the average person does like 4 or 5 episodes and like 75% of them never do another one. And, because it's tough, because when you're first starting out, unless you're a celebrity or have, kind of a built audience already, you're kind of starting from ground zero. And if you can't expect monetization, you can't expect hundreds or thousands of listeners. I mean, literally that first year, I probably had 100 people listen, maybe, the first year. And I had some personal branding, some things out there that, should have, made that more, but it's just the reality of the crowded nature of podcasting. And so I just got very deliberate and very disciplined with my schedule of the podcast. And then, as far as time in general, I think I've gotten pretty good with clients and scheduling things and kind of making time to make things happen. And I think you have to be intentional with your time because number one, it's our only finite asset.
100%.
I say all the time, we can always make more money. We can't make more time. So I am intentional about it, both in my personal and business life.
That's some wise words for the beginning. That's amazing. Yeah. And I also know the struggle of starting a podcast and Ryan, we're here to talk about your sweet spot today. So I want to start with your entrepreneurial journey. As you just mentioned, you worked in advertising agencies and in marketing for over 20 years. And I wondered, what are the biggest changes you saw happening in the industry over 2 decades? And maybe even more important, in your experience, what remains constant success factors in the marketing biz?
Yeah. It's interesting. We like to make a big notion, and it has been a fundamental change in the places that we market. This change from analog to digital, and it's certainly an impactful and dynamic change. I don't want to downplay it, but at the same time, there are some fundamental truths in messaging and persuasion and branding that hold true no matter what the medium is. Sometimes the medium discussion kind of gets to me a bit because, and even we put the name, on our agency, full service digital agency. And I wish we could just remove all of that. But inevitably, if we don't say that, people go, but are you full service? But are you digital? And so we keep it. But inherently, I think if you aren't digitally fluid in capability today, you're probably getting lost on some level. It's just kind of the expectation. And so it kind of be like, well, do you know how to design an outdoor board? Well, do you know how to do social media? Do you know, do you have someone on your, team that can code a WordPress site? It's kind of like table stakes in a way. But some of the truths and the principles of marketing and branding and media, like at the end of the day, you still need fundamental reach and frequency to a defined target to move the needle for your brand, whatever you're selling. And so those fundamental truths haven't changed. And we'll probably get into some of those 7 things. I don't know if you want me to cover that now, but there's certainly some more dynamic truths that hold today, even with all the changes.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can totally dive into the 7 truths right away, because as you just said, I see it in my clients and with my studio practice. I see that, of course, the mediums change. You switch from analog to digital. You get even more short form. And of course, some messages you have to cut them down if you want to, let's say, explore TikTok more. And maybe you don't have the old 6-minute mission statement movie, the image movie you had back in the days. You have to cut it down into chunks. But I wonder if the old saying the medium is the message still holds true. Let's explore your 7 truths, maybe.
I think you're right. Attention spans have changed. You know, like we just have so many more things to do and opportunities, you know. And media is one of them, but in everything else in life too. Like we just have so much more availability of time and resource, and time is probably the wrong word, but resources, and you know, whether it's travel, whether it's availability, and putting, you know, some of the last couple years to the side, but generally speaking,
in general,
our ability, and just I don't know, we're just much more fluid creatures in our availability and resource. So with that said, you know, I do think there's, you know, 7 things that I kind of talk about, they kind of hold true. They're undeniable truths. The first is reach. And I talked about that a little bit. Like no matter what you're doing in marketing, you have to hit a defined target, and you have to have it. It's got to be big enough to carry the day, because, you know, you've got to have scale. And unless, you know, and the only caveat to that would be B2B, but you still have to have the right reach. You have to have the right target. And so going back to the, you know, the truths of media, reach and frequency hold true. The second is attention. And, you know, you have to garner attention. You have to, you know, it's said, I certainly didn't coin it, but it's very true. Attention is today's modern currency. Because attention is so fleeting. And so, you know, TikTok has trained our brains to, I think we all have a bit of ADD in us now, you know, it's like here and there.
Snippet sized content all the way. Yeah.
But there, you know, we get hit by like 8,000 messages a day. And whether that's a logo staring at you off of someone's shirt, or whether it's a commercial that you see, it's been said it's between 7,000 and 10,000 messages a day is what we get hit with. And so attention is so fleeting, you have to be able to garner it no matter what you're doing. The third is creativity. Creativity is still the modern variable of success for me. I still think it holds true. It's performance marketing has made everyone think that you can just put an offer out there and drive conversions. But the reality is creative work is still, I think, the definition of successful marketing, because it does move the needle in ways that an offer just can't alone. And so creativity is a never-ending truth in marketing. Number 4 is distinctiveness, which is standing out. What is your, what makes you different from your competition? Someone that I follow very closely, Christopher Lochhead, is, I think, a modern genius in marketing, and he believes in category creation versus just branding. And I think, in a way, I believe I agree with him on some levels and not on others, but I do agree with him in this notion of distinctiveness and standing out. And you'll never compete if you're creating a nuanced or different approach, you know, versus your competition. And I think that is key no matter what you do. Number 5 is consistency. Number 6 is emotion. And last is motivation. I think most of those stand out on their own, but all of those hold true. And, you know, I post a lot about those, and those are the 7 undeniable truths.
They're amazing. I really like that. I read about them in the preparation for our talk, and there are 2 that I want to dive in more. I think creativity we're totally going to cover later when it comes to personal branding and storytelling. But I wondered, because what I think about a lot is what you said about the attention span. I also believe the attention economy is really shaking up how brands can communicate, how they market themselves. They have to be way more entertaining than they used to be, incorporate infotainment into the whole brand building strategy. And as you just said, the attention span gets shorter and shorter, and we have Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram. And at the other end, we have like long form podcasts, like hour-long talks, or in Joe Rogan's case, 3.5 freaking hours long talks, and we binge watch series over the weekend, and it's like hours and hours of content that we consume, and it's like the scissor opens up and we have super short form and super long form. Where do you see opportunities for brands in there, or what do you make of that?
Yeah, I think the one thing I say is content is king and video rules the day right now.
Yeah.
And it's true. We kind of have an insatiable appetite. But I'll say this, long form works, short form works. Certainly short form has been having its day the last 18 months, 24 months with TikTok, Instagram Reels, this notion of, 30-second videos, 15 short form videos, and really cutting it down, like what might have been 3 minutes worth of content, cutting it into, hyper fast cuts and trimming it down. I see the value in that. I do think that the art of storytelling is still real and alive. And I think that people will stick around for long form if you're educating, entertaining, or telling a story. And so I think those truths still hold true. And I don't think that, any form necessarily is ruling over the other. It just depends on the opportunity and the brand and what you're trying to convey. The biggest thing that I think in all of it that's really here, and it's going to be the day moving forward, is that consumers have never been more aware that they're being marketed and advertised to. And so I think brands have to acknowledge that and know that people are willing to, spend time on your brand, but you need to entertain, you need to educate, or you need to have a reason, and it can't just be self-serving. And so, I think, consumers are willing to come along for the ride if you're serving one of those needs, or, again, you're giving them a chuckle for the day, giving them a slight break from things they can appreciate. Or if you're educating them on something they're wanting to know about, they'll come along for the ride. But but the notion of just hardcore marketing straight at them is really ineffective and not going to work. And so it's less about the length and the time and the medium, and more the approach and the story that you're conveying.
Absolutely. So with all that strategy knowledge, I know you worked for many great companies, you developed a lot of successful campaigns, and based on all that experience, you founded your full-service digital agency, The Radical. And I love the name, but you got to tell us what's radical about it. Why does it have to be radical? That's the question.
Well, it's back to that notion of distinctiveness, and breaking through. And I think I understood that there are a lot of agencies, and I know that there's a lot of great companies out there doing a lot of great work, and, starting, a more boutique agency. I wanted, when you name yourself radical, it forces yourself and your people to push the envelope. Yeah. And also it gives your people license to push the envelope. A lot of places, I think people might have creative people on the team, might have ability to do a lot of things, but they're a little held back by, what people might think, people might say, by the judgment of certain things. And so I wanted it to be liberating and empowering, not only for clients, but for our internal people to go, how do we live up to this name every day? And I know that I can bring out my most creative self or the craziest ideas ever, because the name of our company is Radical. Yeah. And so it was as simple as that. And it also just happened to be that when I was coming up with the name, my name is Ryan Alford, and Ryan Alford Digital is RAD. So I was going to call it RAD.
Amazing.
And then I just said, I didn't want it to be about me. I really didn't. And that's why it's not called Ryan Alford Digital to this day. It's about Radical, but it just happened to be in the name. And so,
okay, that's perfect.
It's
all
perfect.
Right. So, but what does it mean on a daily working basis to evoke being radical in your clients and in your team? Are there some practices you can share, some insights?
The first thing is we have roughly 22 people that work in the business. So obviously boutique size, not hundreds, but we have I could say this with a straight face, no bureaucracy. We have a very flat organization. We hire people that are entrepreneurial driven. We certainly have tiers and levels. We have certain people that have 20 years of experience, and we have certain people that have 2 years or a year or no experience. But there's great ideas can come from anywhere. We have multiple brainstorms a week on clients. Sometimes we're hyper specific behind a creative brief, but oftentimes we are just specific to a client and, just talking out loud about some of their challenges and brainstorming creative ideas across mediums. And so again, flat organization, great ideas can come from anywhere. We truly live and breathe that. And then, just always kind of keeping the ideas flowing and no idea kind of being, turned away until kind of fleshed out and kind of thought through for how that could come to life. And then, being open and honest and direct with clients. There's something about, again, back to the name, it frees me up, or it frees our people up to go, you hired Radical. We're going to push you. If you wanted Acme marketing agency, you should have hired Acme. If you wanted us just to be order takers, you should have hired Acme, but you hired Radical. And so we're going to push you and we're going to make you uncomfortable. And that's what you pay us to do.
That's amazing. You get what you came for. That's great. So sticking with that, I read about you, about your agency. You wrote about the science behind creativity, and that really caught my eye because I know that creativity is widely appreciated, but still a lot of clients struggle when it comes to deciding between ideas or evaluating creative results. So how can I imagine this creative science? What do you factor in to decide whether something is a creative success?
Yeah. I'm a firm believer in like the art and the science. I think, in any given period, we've gone too far. Sometimes it's art for the sake of art. Sometimes we've been, the data world has overtaken us and it's all performance. And again, results matter. No one's more clear about that than me. But the reality is branding and creativity builds over time. And we've gotten into this place of a lot of short-termism in marketing where, yes, no one understands better than I, having worked with some of the largest companies in the world, that results matter and that we have to drive behavior in the near term. But at the same time, some things take time and have a building effect because, you can't, what do they say? You can't eat an elephant. You have to eat an elephant one bite at a time. It's like, but the science of it is, blending the data that's available now, where we can literally have iteration, where we can test multiple variables of creative short form videos and things, and we can use that data to inform and empower the creative process. And so, great ideas have to stand up to results at some point. And so, though, depending on the campaign and depending on the goal, we'll preach patience, or, we'll preach, the proof's in the pudding, the proof's in the results. And so we use data to, the great thing about the world now is, we don't have to go do a focus group. We can put it to play in practice on social media. And that is the focus group on some levels. And then don't get me wrong, I still believe firmly in creative testing and certain research at the right time and place. But I also believe that, we can get real world feedback. And, one of the other nuances of just Radical is we move quickly. We produce probably 3,000 to 5,000 videos a month for a 20 person agency. It's incredible.
It's massive.
We have a production studio here in our facility. And we move fast, and we just, get out of the way and knock it out. And then we read and react to what the market tells us.
Ryan, talking about creative success, you host one of the most popular marketing podcasts in the US, the Radcast. We just talked about it. And I'm wondering, what made you start the podcast? What were your strategic and creative goals with that format?
Yeah. I have had a couple podcasts over the years I've been podcasting for about 10 years. And when I started the agency, I saw this trend kind of taking place, and I also was starting to invest in my own personal brand. And so I saw the podcast as 3 or 4 different things. Number one, it kept me learning and understanding and talking with industry leaders, entrepreneurs, great people with great business journeys, learning. So it was a source of learning just for me and keeping me fresh. Obviously, I'm a husband, and I have 4 boys, and yes, I read and stay, but the podcast was a learning place for me to kind of stay fresh on topics. It forced me, it created discipline around learning and understanding from other people. It also established a brand asset for the agency. I believe, again, I didn't coin this, but I believe in it firmly. Every company has the opportunity to be a media company now. Yeah. And, we live and breathe that daily with the content we produce. And I saw it as a branded asset for the agency, the Radcast, Radical, and as a branded asset for my personal brand. So was developing my personal brand, saw this as a way to keep, my name out there associated with the field, to help generate business for Radical. And it is the source of about 70% of our leads for our agency, ironically.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing.
So, and then finally, thought leadership, keeping the agency, keeping myself out there from a thought leadership perspective. We actually work with a lot of leaders on personal branding, outside of just our own. It's a way to build thought leadership. And then finally, it is the Trojan horse for content development, because one of the biggest challenges is, okay, where am I going to get content for the agency or my personal brand? When you host a podcast twice a week, it gives you the source of content for your personal brand, for your agency, for other things, because you can cut that up into images, into pictures, into videos, into highlights, long form, short form. It becomes a source of a ton of the content that you can use across things. And a lot of it's evergreen, a lot of these guests, I've had A-list celebrities to A-list company leaders, Aruna Rivachandran, the CMO of WebEx, to Bruce Buffer, the UFC announcer, to, the host of The Bachelor, Jesse Palmer.
Amazing. Yeah.
And every one of them have, what does that have to do with marketing? Everyone has a business journey now. Everyone has a marketing story now. And so you can learn from all of them. So it's a source of connections. I could go on and on. The benefits are crazy, but the discipline and sticking with it and leveraging my personal brand has allowed us to increase the quality of the guests. So it's been a crawl, walk, run. And now, we're consistently in the top 100 on Apple and top 25 on Spotify and marketing podcasts.
Yeah. It's good to hear. That's great. And maybe you want to give us a peek under the hood. So how do you market your podcast? What are, in your experience, the most successful channels for your brand?
Well, this would be one of them, coming on lots of shows. We do a lot of reach. My team reaches out to, and just offers up me to, certain podcasts. We, heavily invest in social media and posting and, organic reach. We will run ads from time to time. I engage with a lot of other podcasts on social media. It's been very organic because, again, we're over 4 years old. It didn't happen overnight. But it's been, just organically kind of going on shows. I've been on some pretty big shows, raising my personal brand awareness. The podcast tends to come with it and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. I read that your podcast concept, beyond other things, is love while you learn. So I experienced that successful brands, as we already mentioned today, are also entertainers. So is there more to this philosophy of infotainment as maybe a takeaway for the sweet people listening right now?
Yeah. I mean, it's back to attention. People, we all take ourselves a little too seriously. And, like our podcast, we have 2 episodes a week. And one of them is a pretty serious, business episode. I'm pretty laid back like I am now. I'm in my comfortable chair in the studio and I host people and people feed off of that because they go, wow, this guy's just laid back and comfortable. They kind of let their hair down, so to speak. And it works well with the guests to kind of get comfortable. But I'm also, I'm irreverent. I mean, I can have a potty mouth. In our Friday episodes, we just have fun. We cut up, we talk marketing news. But I have 2 comedians that come on the show with me that are writers and actors on our team. And so we have fun. We talk about marketing news, but we also talk about some of the craziness of it, of, the metaverse and NFTs. And believe me, we have clients doing them. We're not making fun of it. It's a real trend, but some of the language and terminology is just like you hear yourself saying it. We're not afraid to call out the fact that, 5 or 10 years ago, this would have sounded like complete bullshit, Yeah, absolutely. And so I think there's a realness and a rawness to that people appreciate. And I think it's the same thing for, brands. Customers like brands that can let their hair down a little bit. Wendy's has one of the best Twitter, profiles in the world because they let their hair down. They're real irreverent. They make fun of their competition and people appreciate that. And so people want to be entertained. They know they're being marketed to, but you can have fun with them. You can let your hair down, have a personality. And I think, brands are starting to come around to that. And again, I think you can push your brand a lot further with some underhanded humor than just a price point and a feature benefit.
Being related to real life topics, being authentic. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, we talked about it already, but with authenticity and humor and all of that, you also build a strong personal brand for yourself. So I wonder, what role do you think storytelling plays when building a personal brand? I mean, in general, everyone knows it does, but like hands-on from your experience, how can you incorporate telling a story about your personal brand in your everyday marketing strategy?
The days of hiding behind the desk are over. Like yes, you can have an amazing idea and you don't necessarily have to be out there if you don't want to, but you're really limiting your opportunity. We teach leaders this all the time. I'm a firm believer in this. And it doesn't mean you have to give away every, moment of your life. There's this, I think, misconception that you have to, give away too much. And it's somewhere in the middle. But I do think people buy from people. And that's in B2B or B2C. And we preach a lot at the agency, B2H, business to human. And I like to just coach people and myself and my own personal brand around bringing humanity to life and, telling, the things that you're comfortable with. People want to learn and understand both your ups, both your downs, and things that you're comfortable sharing. I share a lot about my family. I share a lot about, both the ups and the downs of being an entrepreneur. And I'm open book about it because I ultimately want to help people, learn anything they can from my mistakes, my successes. And you have to kind of make up your mind that you're comfortable sharing that. But I think if most people, if they'll get kind of their own ego out of the way, their own kind of, I don't know, it's mainly people that just think I don't have anything to share, but that's just not true. We all have something to share. And I think telling those stories and being authentic and being transparent is ultimately a win-win, not only for your audience, but also for yourself, because it's freeing to kind of have that transparency. And you'll be amazed at kind of how it frees up a lot of other things in your life.
Yeah, I share that experience. First of all, I love the expression business to human. I totally remember that. That's an amazing takeaway. That sounds so, that's really, really hands-on. And also, I think there's this saying, you can make it personal, but not private. You know, if you decide on what you're willing to talk about, what you're ready to do, get a little bit out of your comfort zone, which also makes things more exciting. And if you start with that flow, it really more and more topics appear. I think you probably had the same experience. Once you start on that journey, once you start telling the story, more and more topics appear, and you can do follow-ups, and people will start asking questions, and maybe you end up as a German guy doing an English podcast. You never know.
That's right. I'm just glad you're not talking German to me. I would be totally lost. I'd have to get my translator in here. No, but you're very fluent. You're more than fluent.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, you are extremely well spoken.
Thanks. Well, Ryan, I want to know, are there some personal brands you think are worth examining more? Are there any personal brands that stand out to you at the moment?
I've had a lot of these on my show, but so I'll, shameless plug. You can learn about them on the Radcast.
Nice.
But I was very interested in them. Grant Cardone does an amazing job with his personal brand. He's a real estate influencer. He was on, Undercover Billionaire, quasi, I guess, entrepreneurial celebrity at this point. But Grant does a great job. He shows his family. He shows his day. He's very transparent, obviously extremely wealthy, doing very well. But I think you see behind him, and I really appreciate the branding part of his personal brand. His brand is 10X. And he does a great job of pulling that thread through almost everything that he does, but he's behind. I know he has a team, and I have a team, but he's front and center, both organic content and stories and going live, and he's always kind of on the cutting edge. I think he's great from a personal brand standpoint. Pace Morby, another real estate guy who's super authentic. He does a show called Triple Digit Flip on A&E, but he's amazing. Had him on the show, but he's crushing it with his personal brand. Again, a really big family guy. So I relate well to him, raising multiple children, having his wife involved in his business, but super, super transparent. Trying to think of someone maybe that wasn't on the show that was, I guess so it's not just shameless plugs for past guests.
That's absolutely legit. Yeah. That's fine. Of course.
but I respected what they were doing. And those are two, certain icons. And, I'll give him his due. He's not necessarily my favorite flavor, but I mean, Gary V, is kind of one of the pioneers in the space.
Definitely. Yeah.
I mean, and so I respect the hell out of him. I don't necessarily love his personal approach, and I don't relate to him personally, but I respect the hell out of him being one of the pioneers in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. Sweet people, today I want to tell you about a very special service that I offer for entrepreneurs and artists. It's a creative coaching that it's going to change the way you work and have a huge impact on everything you do. Most people go through life and never find their purpose. The one thing that they're best at, what they need to share with the world. The most successful entrepreneurs and artists I have worked with found their purpose and used it to create outstanding brands and tell ravishing stories. I think it's time you find yours. With my exclusive 3-month creative coaching, The Purpose Quest, I help you to rediscover your purpose. Our quest includes an immersive 5-day experience where I will help you to break free from limiting beliefs, ignite your creative power, and find what really drives you. In the following weeks, I'll work closely with you to define and implement your individual strategy, turning your purpose into a brand success story. Find out more on sweetspot-studio.com and get in touch. And now, let's get back to the show. Ryan, I want to cover a different topic. I want to try and cover some distance between the US and Europe. Let me phrase it like this. When I prepared for our talk, I wondered what the difference between the US market and Europe is when it comes to marketing and creative work. So my hypothesis is that, of course, most marketing rules and techniques apply all over the world and for most industries. But I'm keen to learn more about the qualitative aspects of our craft, such as storytelling or creative work, since I believe they're deeply rooted in culture and society. So let me give you an example. I feel like storytelling is an integral part of American culture. You have creative writing classes in high school. You're used to pitch your business and yourself. And every American I met basically nailed their tight five about what they do and why they do it. And I think that's amazing. And in Europe, especially in Germany, we don't usually have that. So do you have a similar experience with clients or people from other parts of the world?
Yes, I do. I don't know that I have the greatest explanation to it, but I will try. There's something, and it's both beautiful and different and nuanced at the same time. But whether it's Germany or Europe, certainly people that we work with, international companies, and some of them are in Germany, and there's an engineering component to the German kind of approach that's very systematic. It's very buttoned up. It's why they make some of the best cars in the world. It's like, that experience to me is, and even I have friends that, my kids play soccer, and there's a couple of German families that have played, not necessarily this year, but in the past, and kind of getting to know them. And I don't know exactly what it is, but everything is very systematic and scientifically driven. But it's not, I don't know, at the core, like the American spirit, I feel like is naturally transparent and like open and like a little bit of just, we're going to get this shit done. Like we're just going to, and there's both wonderfulness to that, but there's also flaws to that.
100%.
It's not always the most efficient way, but the European and German approaches typically are more efficient, but maybe a little less human. Like the humanity is a little out of it, but not from an American's point of view. Like,
100%.
I want to see your real self. No, this is not about being real. This is about how do we get from A to B as quickly as possible in the most efficient way possible. There's like this efficiency component. And I think understanding that nuance is pretty key when you're messaging to the audience, because it needs to be, I don't know if lack of emotion is the right way, but it is somewhat lack of emotion and more about efficiency.
I mean, you're talking to a creative from Germany. You're talking about outcasts. So really, I mean, the most crucial step in the whole process in ideation or creative processes here, in my experience, is really cracking people open, getting them to talk. I mean, imagine this scenario in the US compared to here. You meet new people, you sit at a table, everyone's supposed to say who they are, what they're doing, what their job is, what they may be here for. It's a total, excuse my French, it's a total shit show in Germany. Everyone is mumbling. They're like, and I do this little, everything is so humble and approved. And it's like this, you need signatures and approvals. And it's like the car industry rules our whole thinking sometimes. It's 7 years to a new model. And I also studied innovation management. And this is all about being, in your words, maybe radical, doing high-speed testing, doing sprints, quick A/B tests. And it's a really huge cultural difference between, I think between the US, and Germany.
What do you think? I mean, it's always been interesting. Like the friends that I've had, like I felt like I've known them, but I haven't really known them, like because
gotta get them drunk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is the common denominator. Just have a few pints and things start to open up a little bit. But I don't know. It's certainly cultural. I think that. And what's interesting is I never feel like, and this is why I appreciate it on some level, because I'm probably an extroverted introvert. Believe it or not, some people would like go, no, you're an extrovert, surely. But I probably am. And so on some level, I appreciate the, European, I don't know, like I don't have to, I don't have to let everything out. Like my day is not made or break because I get to express every opinion. And I think there's some truth to that as well, where I feel like we're a little flawed over here because everyone feels like, their opinion and their, their drama needs to be aired, like,
yeah, definitely.
Like sometimes I'm like, can we just get some shit done? Can we just get back to it?
Yeah.
I care about your drama, but and it matters, but maybe later. Can we?
Yeah. Well, I think maybe one of the sweet spots could be to meet in the middle, right? Find the places where you can improvise, share your personal opinions on things, and also be profesh when it comes to it. But maybe one more time to dig down into this storytelling thing. I don't know how your upbringing and your education was, but I really have the feeling that you grow up on storytelling and creative writing classes. At least all the Americans I know and my friends that live in the US, they are all so fluent in the way they present ideas. And even if you talk about your vacation, I've been away for a long weekend, and boom, you dive into a whole perfectly hero journey planned out little segment about their holidays. And here it's like, it was nice.
Yeah.
So is that something? Exactly. Yeah. The beer was nice. Do you feel, is that something you can step away from and analyze it if you grew up on it?
Yeah. I mean, I do think it goes back to, whether it's grade school or college or whatever, there is, that creative writing aspect that seems to be more, prevalent here, and people being maybe more freed up to, think in those ways. It's hard to know exactly, having not experienced, other than just, working with people from Europe and otherwise, knowing the nuances of how they were brought up or taught, what all of those are. But they're obviously clear because we see them, working with different creative agencies and different people about how their thought processes are. And I think you nailed it with like the presentation aspect. I think there's a freeing aspect that I feel like maybe creative directors or creative people here in the US seem to embrace quicker. I don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just the acceptance of all of that. I still think, to all listeners, maybe from Europe, it's worth looking over the great pond and get inspired and loosen up a bit. For sake. Yeah. Let your hair down.
As you so beautifully put it. Exactly. So Ryan, the last big topic I want to tackle is I want to look into the future with you. So what do you think will be relevant trends in marketing over the next years? You talk so much in your podcast about strategic trends like building personal brands, but also technology trends. And we covered NFTs slightly and new channels. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah. Here's what I hope happens, and here's what I think's going to happen.
Okay,
like in my crystal, but yeah, they're separate, but hopefully equal. I do want to see, and I think you're going to see the data situation where personal data and those things with the move to Web3. I'm hoping, and I think the promise of this is kind of removing these walled gardens, of who owns the data and all that, and that being more privately owned by the individual, being able to both monetize it, keep what should be private, while also leveraging the kind of the promise of the decentralization of content. I want to see content creators, maintain control, possession, and the rights to their content, whether that's video, whether that's artwork. And I think that is the promise of, Web3 and NFTs and, the tokenization of things. I think there's so much opportunity. I think you're going to see this happen where those rights and those, the ability to monetize yourself and your content or things that you own in a way that is removed from having all of these others kind of hands in the pocket of it. And don't get me wrong, I also believe that, you know, if I invest in a platform that allows you to sell your stuff, that, you know, there might be some allow, you know, if there has to be investment, then you have to allow for some amount of percentage or things like that. But I'm hoping that we get away from these walled gardens. And I think that's what you're going to see. And when I say walled gardens, I say, you know, and whether that's Google or Facebook or otherwise, and it's not because those are going to go away necessarily. But I think but the reality is, if you think about, like, if you've been on Facebook for 10, 15 years, all of the things that you have posted there, all of the content, all of those things that are very personal, if you drop Facebook tomorrow, all that goes away. You know, you can't, you know, they can say, well, you can export certain, you can't take it with you. You know, so, you know, I want to see, and I think you're going to see some of those things go away. And from a data perspective, you know, people just aren't going to allow themselves to be tracked the way that they were. And so you're going to have to learn to play more behaviorally. You're already seeing this with what's happened with iOS and Apple. Some of the data tracking and all that is just, it's going to become less personal. And so you're going to have to get more nuance in your creative. And it really goes back to almost like Back to the Future. Like back in the day when we had these wonderful creative campaigns and television, things like that, you didn't know every nuance, but you thought about creative more holistically, and you had to be more creative. You know, when you suddenly can't know that someone spent $747 this week on X stuff, you can't, you know, target down to that micro level. You have to be more creative and thoughtful in your processes. And I think you're going to see that from a creativity, the rebirth of creativity in marketing is coming fast if it's not already here.
Hallelujah. That sounds amazing. Also, I think a huge playground is going to be the metaverse, which maybe will conflict with the whole data privacy topic, but I don't know. Have you ever guided a brand into the metaverse?
Yeah, we're doing that now as we speak. Wow. And I'm actively talking with and involved with one of the largest sellers of digital real estate in the metaverse, Earth2. Earth2.io is their website, where literally you can buy parcels of land that are exact replicas of the physical world. But it's a metaverse. It's going to have an experience much like Roblox or Decentraland, where you have an avatar and everything else. Right now, it's just buying parcels of land, but you're going to have a more real world experience there. But I am, you know, involved in that. That is certainly coming. I think it's an experience. It's kind of a transition from gaming into that. Not that gaming is going away. I think it's going to be another place where attention is divided as we get more into these AR and VR experiences. And it's just another medium. I think we can get real heavy into this real quickly. And the reality for most brands is that this is going to be another place where you need to consider, you know, your medium and how you approach people. And the best ways to do that are still being defined, as well as all of the players. And so, yes, if you're Nike, if you're Coca-Cola, and you have billions of dollars and billions of things, you need to be investing and trialing now because you have the dollars and you can carve that out. But I think for a lot of brands, though, it's a little bit of wait and see. Certainly test and look for opportunities to partner in these experiences with the metaverse and NFTs, because the reality is our youth is growing up here. I say this a lot on my podcast. I see the world through the eyes of my children. I have 4 boys from age 6 to age 12, and they put a lot of value in digital currency. And in a way, and we keep them, they play every sport. It's not that they're playing video games all day, but my 12-year-old could care less what he wears to school. But if his avatar isn't exactly designed like he wants, he's had a bad day. And,
wow. Okay.
And so, but the insight there is the understanding that the children that are going to rule the world and own things and do things sooner rather than later are growing up digitally native. And that digital nativeness, the value and the intrinsic value that they put in digital things that my generation might be starting to play with a little bit, but still is more of a physical goods generation. They are more digitally driven. And so you've got to understand that inside and understand, depending on where your target falls, you need to be testing and knowing that that day is coming. Yeah. But I think at the same time, don't get too overwhelmed with it at this exact moment. Just be paying attention.
That's great advice. That's great advice, and a lot of hope for all the creatives listening. The time of big creativity will rise again. That's amazing.
It's here.
Exactly. I have two last questions that I ask all of my guests. The first one is, what inspires you personally right now? Are there any books, shows, podcasts, conversations you heard, read, said, that you can recommend to the sweet people listening?
Absolutely. What inspires me daily is my children. And watching them. And I use that as a real awareness because I actually use them for inspiration for marketing, because I do think it is there. Shameless plug, I'm trying to bring to life this perspective through the Radcast and what we do at the podcast. So I think it's a great entree. I mean, literally today's guest, Allison Ferenczi, is one of the pioneers in AR. Camera IQ, and she talks and she gives some of the best perspective I've ever had from a guest on the metaverse. So go look up her episode. I don't know when this will launch, but so we're bringing that to life. But Christopher Lochhead is an amazing inspiration for me. I always kind of go back to him because he pushes the envelope in category creation versus competing with brands. And so I read all of his stuff. If you Google him, you'll find multiple books that he's written. And he's amazing. I listen to his podcast. He's got an amazing podcast. I'm trying to think of others. The Marketing Book Podcast has been my most recent one because literally it's every Friday, and it's always a marketing book that they have the author on, and they talk for an hour about the book. And it's almost becomes like, if I don't have time to read every single book, but it gives you an hour kind of summary of some of the key points. And so
that's perfect.
So that's been a good one. And I love the book Contagious Content. And why things sell and why things catch on is one of my favorites.
Thanks for those recommendations. Besides listening to your podcast, of course, we're going to check out the book and the other cast. Amazing. Yeah. So final question for you, Ryan. What is next for you, for Radical, for the Radcast? What can we look forward to?
Yeah. The Radcast, we are growing into kind of a media company. We're going to have multiple podcasts as part of the Radcast umbrella. So we're bringing on, almost like a foundational media company where, the Radcast will have marketing news. We'll have the Radcast, which is inspirational marketing guests. And then maybe, even talking with bringing other hosts and other things under the umbrella of the Radcast, as well as I am literally the executive producer. We're filming a comedy TV series right now called Up and Coming. It's going to be part of the Radcast, another entity. And so we're exploring NFTs and further, kind of like self-funded and self kind of produced content like that. And because it's back to kind of this education entertainment space that I think branded content is going to have to live and breathe in. And so literally we had a team, we have like 4 million views on this concept on TikTok about these two city planners. And so we've brought it to life in a comedy series. And so doing that and, just chasing 4 boys around and seeing where the world goes. But I don't know. I'll always be a marketer at heart. And, we're kind of defining a couple of different play areas for Radical now, both in B2B and then this kind of leadership, personal branding space. So just staying at it.
That's amazing. That sounds so exciting. Best of luck for that journey. Venturing into a media company sounds amazing. And Ryan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Mark, it was a pleasure. I listened to a few episodes. You're doing an incredible job, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come on the show. I hope I added some value for your listeners.
100%. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
sweet people, how did you like that? I enjoyed talking to Ryan. He had great energy, and with 20 plus years of experience, a lot of things to share about marketing and brand building. What will definitely stick with me is the idea of B2H marketing, business to human communication. And in the future, I think I want to further explore the cultural differences when it comes to creative work and storytelling. That's it for today. Next week, I'll be back talking to Alex Vilakis. She's a designer and podcast host, and we'll talk about creative training and careers and the future of creative education. Take care, and I'll hear you on the sweet side.
This podcast is produced by Sweetspot Studio. New episodes each week, wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you enjoyed the show, leave a rating and subscribe to never miss an episode. Find out more at sweetspot-studio.com.